impacted significantly by my colleagues on the panel. And the overarching title of tonight's time together is moving from surviving to thriving. And as a coach, what I do is I run alongside and I provide skills, I provide support, and I provide solutions for whatever it is that we may be going through, whether it's a personal or national or international tragedy. And I work very often with clients who are seeing professionals. In my other life, I was a psychologist. And my colleagues, when I made the shift to coaching, told me, well, you were never really a true psychologist anyway. Because I didn't see people as needing to be labeled and actualizing that label. I saw people as having the ability to become what they were created to be. And so that came from me because I was clocked into a family where I had a brother who was mentally retarded. And his IQ was measured at 62. And so given that, he had definite limitations. But he happened to have been a part of a family that were very educated and felt that he had to pull his weight. So my parents, who died at 86 and 92, would set the bar, and John would excel it. And they'd set it again, and he'd exceed that. And so in my environment came this thought that although we may be labeled one thing, our environment can encourage us to be something else. John was my example. Each one of the panelists has told us that tragedies and obstacles are a part of life. But what I sort of glean from what they're saying is somehow our why were we created? Why were we allowed to survive? Why not my house? That sense of why often propels people to help their neighbor or find a new purpose for being. And so that move from surviving to thriving really, really sort of encompasses your why. And as we look at our why, we see that that could be the focal point of who we are. Our meme, those values, those thoughts, those philosophies that make us who we are. And because of who we think we are, it impacts our relationship, our financial status, our body image, our self, our spirituality, and many other aspects or environments that surround us as human beings. So, for me, my experience of Sandy was, yes, the rain and the devastation, but just before the skies got black, there was a tree right close to our house, and in that tree, there was a bird. And this bird is just singing along. And the winds and the rains are howling. And I say to myself, okay, why is this bird not as traumatized as I am? What is it about his sense of why, or her sense of why, that enables her within all of this turmoil to be at peace? And it did not leave. Despite all the devastation, despite all of that, that imagery never left me. And it went on to contribute to my trying to understand what does the environment have to offer us in the midst of our devastation. My dad, my mom, and my brother all died within the past 2.5 years. I had gotten married in 2008 for the second time in July. Packed up, moved with my husband to Texas to start a happy life. 4 months after, my dad calls to say he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Now, I am 51 years old at that point. Fortunately for me, I had never seen my parents or anyone in my family in a hospital. So this now moved us into a new experience. Right after that, Mom got sick. Right after that, John developed a seizure disorder, which was the beginning of dementia. So I'm confronted with this sense of, what do I do? I'm a native New Yorker who by choice and by love has moved to Texas. There is no one else in my family to care for my New York family. And so the conversation with my new husband was, what do we do? My decision was to come back. So after flying back and forth for several months, my body couldn't do it anymore. And I decided to relocate back to New York. And there have just been examples of how the orientation of our family, which basically says the environment wins, really made this the most fabulous experience in my life. My dad had written a book 20 years ago, which was a devotional guide. It was entitled Daily Notes to God. It was no longer in print. Because of the debilitation of his illness, he was not able to do a lot of the things that he had grown accustomed. And so one of the things I felt I could do until I moved back to New York was read his devotional guide to him on a daily basis. So at 6 o'clock every morning, I would call New York and say, Dad, are you ready? And we did this for a couple of months. Well, one morning, the phone rings at 5 o'clock in Texas, and I panic because a call at 5 o'clock in the morning could only mean one thing. It was my dad on the other line saying, Janet, are you ready? And I said, ready for what? Our devotional time. This book that was now out of print had begun to be his support. And it was now blessing him in a new way. Sidebar. When the book was initially brought to print, I didn't like how it was formatted. And in the back of my mind, I said, somehow, some way, I'm going to reformat this book. Because Dad's idea was to do it from 1 to 365 rather than calendar and day. So that was one of the revisions I was going to make. So as he got increasingly more ill, he was getting sustenance from reading his devotional guide. And he one day said, you know, this thing is blessing me. And maybe we can republish it. Right up my alley. The book was republished. He was here in Winthrop as a patient. And Karen's staff would come in and want to pray with him and so on. We're Quakers, and I said, well, wouldn't it be great if we could put his book in the bookstore? And that was the first time that I ever met Karen. given the fact that my family was just snowballing in their illness, I didn't get around to doing anything with that. Fast forward, Mom was a dialysis patient in Winthrop Dialysis Center. She passed away last Mother's Day. And Karen and her staff decided that they were going to do a memorial service for patients that had passed in the memorial center, in the dialysis center. Karen and I reconnected. And that is why I'm here today. So there are times in life where we don't understand. But if we rely on the fact that the environment of which we are a part supports us, and there are things individually and collectively that are here for your support, if only we choose to seek them. That process of moving from survival to thriving can begin. I think if we each look at times in our lives where we have been victorious, been successful, and overcome something, we can really sort of look within ourselves and see that the environment has supported us in some way. We've turned on the radio and we've heard one phrase, one word that lifts us from a place of despondency to a place of hope. It's not by accident that we're all here and can look at a screen and, although not experience what each person on that screen has experienced in devastation, something resonates with us. And so if collectively we take the support from each other in our quest to move from survival to thriving, we have been victorious.